So welcome everyone to the Tuesday evening class. My name is Brian Nicholas, as you may have heard. And this evening I'll lead you through a little bit of meditation after a bit of brief explanation for those of you who are new. And then later on we move on to what is known as the wisdom talk. So we should manage about half an hour of meditation before that. And the wisdom talk today is about cherishing our parents from the Buddhist perspective. And we should finish up about 8:30 today with any questions, if there are any, at the end. So meditation is something which those of you who are new have probably heard great things about. Great enough to make you want to spend an evening learning more about it here at the meditation center. And increasingly meditation has become quite an important element of people's lives, especially since there's a part of ourselves which is often neglected in our sense of well-being. Even if we are fitness fanatics, there's a part of ourselves that we often forget about, which is our sense of balance and well-being on the inside of us, rather than just our physical health. And the reason it's become more important is there is a constant barrage of information coming from the outside world, which is competing for our attention. And in a time in history where even the images on the screens of the handheld devices or the big screens we have at home or the computer screens that we have in our offices seem to change every 3 to 5 seconds in order to hold our attention, then it's very hard for us to get our attention to come back within the space of our body where it would prefer to be, in order to recharge some of the energy that the mind needs to carry on being attentive in such a way. The upshot is that if we are constantly bombarded with so much information all day long, by the end of the day we can feel quite worn out. Not physically, but mentally. So meditation proposes that if we can recenter our focus of attention from out there with all those things competing for our attention back to a place within ourselves, then we get a chance to rest the mind, rebalance the mind, and to re-engage with a sense of well-being from the inside. And meditation is a method by which that can be achieved. There's not just one way of meditating, but there are many different ways of meditating. But generally speaking, there are different ways of doing the same thing, which is to relocate our attention from out there with all those distractions back to a more calm and peaceful place on the inside. And in this particular meditation tradition, a place which has been found to be particularly peaceful for the mind to focus is a place down near the solar plexus in the middle of our body, which you can see flashing there, although your one might not flash in quite the same way. The way to relocate the attention to that point could be, there could be different approaches to doing that. One might be to breathe and to bring your attention with your breath down to the very deepest point of the breath. That would get you down to your solar plexus or your diaphragm quite easily. Unfortunately, the breath is always on the move, so you would have to constantly reposition your mind if you were to focus on the breath in that way. And for that reason, with our meditation tradition here, we tend to focus instead on something more stationary, which would be some sort of image that you might conjure up in the mind and place at the center of your solar plexus. So a picture which might be suitable for that might be something bright and rounded, perhaps something like a picture of the sun shining, or a full moon, or a star, or a diamond, something like that, or a bubble. And you would conjure up such a picture in your mind and then bring the picture down to that place inside your body. And for as long as you can hold that picture in your mind, then your attention will stay with the picture. If your attention wanders off, then you'll know about it because the picture would disappear. It's not the end of the world, but you just conjure up the picture all over again and continue where you left off. And little by little, it'll become easier for you to keep your attention on one thing for more and more extended periods of time. Some people work better with a feeling rather than a picture, often because if you're trying to visualize, it can be quite the equivalent of staring with the mind, which is not really the gentle sort of approach that we would require or recommend for the meditation. In which case you can use the feeling that there is the presence of an object at that point instead of a picture, which you might find a more gentle way to achieve the same thing. Often when we're focusing the mind, it's not just a question of distraction, but it's also a question of thoughts coming up in the mind, which can interrupt the continuity of our attention. And if that's the case, something which you may find useful along the way with your meditation is to use some sort of mantra, not out loud, but just heard as if the sound of those words are coming up from the center of your body, the same place where you see the little picture. You could invent a mantra of your own if you wanted to, or you can use these ones which are traditional to our lineage, the words Samma Arahang, if the thoughts are too many just to ignore. But if you find that ignoring the thoughts is something you can do, then just ignoring them will also help the thoughts to get quieter on their own, eventually to settle out into silence in the mind. Yes. Generally with any meditation, before we actually do the meditation, we would spend a few moments making sure our whole body is comfortable and relaxed. Today we're all sitting on chairs, mostly, in which case we try to sit up fairly straight on our chairs, and the way to put our hands together would be with the right hand on top of the left hand, index finger of the right hand up against the thumb of the left hand, and just resting palm upwards in our lap. And the idea of that is if we ever get sleepy, then the finger slips out of place and gives us a little bit of a warning before the rest of us slips off the chair or whatever. So far so good. So normally we meditate for about half an hour, and I'll lead you through that. Don't worry too much about the details because you'll hear it all over again for real this time round. So we start by finding a comfortable position for ourselves in the meditation. If we're sitting on the floor, then we try to sit cross-legged with our right leg over our left leg, the right hand over the left hand, palms turned upwards and resting in our lap. Even if we're sitting on a chair, and we try to sit in a relaxed way. Sometimes it's better to avoid leaning against the backrest, but sitting in an upright position, a position of poise. And we adjust our sitting position so that we feel completely at ease. We close our eyes very gently if we haven't done so already. And breathe in gently and deeply to ourselves. When we breathe in, we may feel our chest expanding and our back straightening. And as we breathe out, we may feel that we are letting go of any negativity or problems with the out-breath. Again, we breathe in, taking in the cool, refreshing spring air, allowing it to refresh us from the inside. And after a few such breaths, we'll start to feel more ready for the meditation ahead. One of the most important parts of the meditation preparation is the way we close our eyes. We need to close our eyes as gently as possible, with our upper and lower eyelashes just touching lightly together. We never squeeze our eyes closed, and we avoid applying any force to our eyes. Our eyelids should feel as light as a feather. And we allow all the muscles around our eyes to relax as far as possible, as they are some of the most sensitive muscles in our body. If we're able to relax the muscles around our eyes, then all the other muscles in our body will follow suit. So we allow that tide of relaxation from around our eyes to spread downwards through our face. We might try putting a smile on our face, relaxing the muscles of our forehead, our cheeks, our chin, allowing them to be fully relaxed. We spread the relaxation down through our neck to our shoulders, to both arms, to our hands, all the way down to our fingertips. We allow the tide of relaxation to continue further on down through our torso, chest, trunk, abdomen. All the way down through our legs, to our feet and our toes. Examining each part of our body, if we feel any discomfort remaining or resulting from our posture, then we can make an adjustment now, so that the blood can circulate freely throughout the body, and so we can minimize any possible aches or pains during the meditation. To the point that we feel we could sit like this for as long as we liked. And when we feel the whole body is totally relaxed, we'll feel as if our body is light in weight, hollow like a tube, with no internal organs, just hollow and light, as if our whole body were floating in the air, or as if our whole body were expanding. light in weight, expanding outwards to the horizon, as if our whole body were merging with the atmosphere around us. Little by little, our body disappearing, until we feel no physicality of our body anymore. And we turn our attention now to relax the mind. Normally our mind is filled with so many thoughts, so many worries. But for now we put each of these thoughts and worries to one side, leaving us with an empty mind, like a person with no future and no past, where all you have is the present moment, the here and now. And you might imagine that you're sitting all alone in a vast space, and all around you is nothing and no one. And if your mind drifts away onto some other thoughts, then just let the thoughts settle and remain in this silence for a few moments. And at this point, we breathe in really slowly and make a mental note of the turning point of our breath, somewhere inside our stomach. And once we've taken note of that turning point of the breath, we can forget about our breath from here on in. It's just that the turning point of the breath inside our stomach is the very center of the body. It's a place where we would prefer to relocate the focus of our attention. It's a place that we're going to rest our awareness right here in the center of the stomach. In practice, it doesn't really matter exactly where we place the mind, at least in the beginning, because once our mind is calm and refined enough, the mind will zero in on the exact center of the body all by itself. So for now, we might conjure up in the mind some sort of bright, imaginary object, maybe like a picture of the sun shining, a full moon, a star, perhaps a diamond, or even the feeling that one of those objects is present in the mind, even if we can't see it, but we can feel its presence by its weight or its texture. And we allow that object to settle, gravitate down gently to that point at the turning point of the breath, or the most comfortable point for us inside the area of our stomach. Once it aligns itself properly, you'll have a feeling almost as if something is alive at the center of the body. But for the time being, we just rest in the mind gently in the general area of the center of the stomach, at the point which feels the most comfortable for us. The way we place our awareness at the center of the body should be as gentle as if you were floating a needle on the surface of some water. It's about the same sort of gentleness that we need when placing the mind gently at the center of the body. But to help to keep the mind in place, we maintain that image of the bright object, or the feeling of the presence of such an object at the center of ourselves. Picture rather like the sun on the horizon, shining bright, clear and round, visualizing without making any effort. Because after all, it's our natural ability of the mind to picture things internally. Whatever we think of, then that picture will arise in the mind. It's the way we visualize. So it can be something like the shining sun at the center of the body, even if it's not as clear in our mind's eye as normally we see it with our real eyes. We can still work with it. Even if it's just a feeling, then we can also work with that as well. The important thing is the continuity, maintaining that inner object as continuously as we can for as long as we can, without letting the mind wander away anywhere else. And in order to dispel any thoughts that return to our mind, we do our best to ignore them. If it doesn't work for us, we can always make use of the traditional mantra, hearing the sound of the words, Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang. The sound of the mantra coming up from the center of that bright inner object. The sound of the mantra being soft, tender, soothing to the mind. Until in our mind there's only two things remaining: the inner object at the center of ourselves and the sound of that mantra, if necessary, coming up from the center of the object. So we repeat the sound of the mantra in a gentle, unhurried way, effortlessly. We repeat the mantra for as long as we need to, until at a certain point the mantra itself will fade away of its own accord. If you start to feel the mind is calm, doesn't wander anymore, then we don't need to restart with the mantra again. We just rest the awareness at the center of the inner object. Do we notice that the sun is drifting away into random thoughts? We just gently bring it back to the center of that inner object as before. Going back to the mantra if necessary. The longer we can rest the mind gently at the center of the body, the more refined our mind will become. Little by little becoming calmer and calmer, more and more refined, softer, more peaceful. And we remain with this inner moment of peacefulness in the mind for a few moments longer. The notional illumination from inside that comes with our inner object is rather like a touch-sensitive switch at the center of the body. If we touch the switch gently enough, then the illumination comes on. In fact, the illumination is always there already. But rather like the sun, it can sometimes be hidden behind a cloud, meaning that we're unable to see it. The light in the mind is sometimes blocked by any impurities within the mind. Sometimes to the extent that we may never know that there is light within our own bodies and minds. But through meditation we can gradually remove all those impurities from the mind, allowing the light of the inner sun to shine through, brighter and clearer than before. So we rest the mind at the center of the body, lightly, gently, continuously. Until we can feel that sense of inner peace flowing outward from the center of the body, shining outwards continuously as we apply the mind with the utmost gentleness, never using any pressure, never using any force, never in a hurry. Allowing that stream of peacefulness and happiness to flow forth from the center, while we observe like a neutral observer, as if we were just observing the view from a bus window, keeping track of the country scenery. The scenery may change, but we keep watching impassively. And the longer we can gently rest the mind while observing at the center of the body, the more refined the mind will become. And in this sense, the mind will make a start on a journey inwards all by itself. A journey inwards into the center of the center, as the mind becomes more and more refined, as we engage and connect with that deeper sense of happiness within, flowing forth, cleansing the body and mind, till we feel that both body and mind are being purified somehow by a special kind of energy from within. For now, we continue to let the mind make that inward journey of its own accord, while we observe neutrally at the center of ourselves, each to our own practice in silence for a few more moments now, until we come to the appropriate time. continue to keep our mind on track at the center of the body the whole of the time. If our attention wanders away onto other things each time we realize, we just bring our attention back again to the center of the body as before. If the inner object disappears, we can think of a new one. If it changes, we just follow it in its new form. There's no need for us to change it back again. If thoughts occur in the mind, then we do our best to ignore them. If they are too persistent to ignore, then we may make use of that mantra. But in the meantime, we allow the mind to rest gently at the center of the body, noticing that sense of happiness from within that refreshes and energizes the mind, leaving us with a feeling of being awake and alive. And if we place our awareness very gently at the center of this feeling or this inner illumination, we'll notice that this inner kind of happiness is something that we can allow to spread outwards from the center by a process known as the spreading of loving kindness. We can extend that loving kindness initially to the whole of ourselves, allowing that feeling or inner brightness to pervade the whole of our own body with good wishes, before allowing it to spread further around us, outwards to everyone, resting the mind at the center of the body, but allowing the radius of our loving kindness to extend further and further outwards into the atmosphere, in all directions all around, with the wish that all living beings be well and happy, free from suffering. We extend that sense of loving kindness further still, outwards to neighborhood, town, city, county, country, the whole continent, outwards to cover the whole world, with the wish that all living people, all beings in the world be happy, free from suffering, free from illness, extending the loving kindness further outwards into space, toward all the stars and galaxies, filling the whole universe with loving kindness and happiness originating from the center of ourselves. We may even cast that same positive energy towards loved ones of ours, those still living, those who already have passed on, with the wish they all be well and happy. They will have the opportunity to discover the same inner peace and happiness that we are now experiencing. So we continue to make good wishes for ourselves and for others, while spreading loving kindness in this way for the last few moments of our meditation together this evening. Sapphe Buddha Palapata Pajjekanancha Yambalang Arahantanancha Tejena Arakam Bandami Sapaso Sapaputthanupavena Sapadhammanupavena Sapasankhanupavena Sattha Soti Bhavantu Te. So if you'd like to come to the end of your meditation for this evening, you can gradually open your eyes again. If you feel at all uncomfortable, then slowly try changing to a more comfortable position before slowly finishing your practice. So far, so good, everyone. New folks? Yeah? So when you close your eyes, you have something to focus on? Okay, so any questions on meditation at this point before we continue? But if you are shy, you can always talk to me about it afterwards, or if you'd like to ask anything in conference. Yeah. Last time I saw you, I think it was last Thursday, and what I'm doing is gradually working my way through a series of practices and values derived from Buddhist culture, which are often known as a set of teaching, basic and quite mundane sort of skills or values in life towards more esoteric ones. And the idea is that if you are able to practice any one of those, you can jump in on the staircase at any point, and it will lead you gradually to the next step on the path. And we have come to number 11 today. And what I generally manage to do is to talk about half of the subject in a particular talk. So I'll start today and I'll continue next time I see you. But today's talk is a start of a subject which I guess you could call family values, from a Buddhist-led perspective at least. Particularly from the point of view of something known as filial piety. Ring any bells? Not particularly? Well, we'll find out more. But up until now, I've been talking mostly about basically standing on one's own 2 feet financially, being able to support oneself, not being a burden on others in society, that sort of thing. And there were 4 things in that particular set of blessings to do with setting oneself up properly in life or becoming a pillar of society. Setting oneself up properly in life or making oneself useful. And in between that and becoming something more of a pillar of society comes this set of blessings to do with family values. The idea being that before you can do something to help society in general, you have to make peace with your own family first of all. And your family may be more or less extensive, but at the very least, generally everyone has some parents in their life. Yes. And the others may be more optional, but generally parents are a part of everyone's life in one way or another. So the first of these is cherishing our parents. The next one after that will be more to do with raising children, so they don't grow up into little monsters, to do with our husband or wife, and to do with not leaving one's work undone. Yeah. So, the basis of this idea of filial piety or respect for one's parents, coming from the Buddhist perspective, is that although gratitude comes a lot later in the staircase, and is dealt with specifically, right down at number 25 in the Blessings of Life. Here at this blessing number 11, we start to meet up with gratitude specifically in the context of our parents. And this specific context is said to be valuable because generally it's something which the sort of kindness that we have received at our parents' hands is particularly obvious for most people. Something which one can pick up on very easily when one is looking for positive values in life. It's something fairly obvious for people to pick up on. And the Buddha said that it's very rare to find two sorts of people in the world. Firstly, a sort of person who's willing to initiate a favor, and secondly, a sort of person who is grateful when someone does them a favor enough to repay that debt of gratitude back to them. And from the point of view of parents, when they have done quite a lot for us, and I'll go into more detail a little bit later on, then if we can, they are certainly someone who has initiated a lot of kindness towards us in their lives. And if we are able to somehow notice that, reciprocate that, then it will make us a stronger, a deeper, a more spiritual person as a result of that. So far so good? Haven't quite lost you yet? This whole facet of gratitude is recognized in many cultures. Cicero said that gratitude is not only the greatest of virtues, but it's the parent of other virtues too. So if you've got gratitude, then other things can build upon that. This is the idea of this staircase, yes. Some have called it the single most important ingredient of living a successful and fulfilled life. Can you think why? Jack Canfield. Oh, the chicken soup for the soul guy. Heard chicken soup for the soul. Well, apparently, if you can appreciate goodness around you, then you can pick up on that goodness. But if you are blind to it, then you got a lot of hard work ahead of you. Yeah, and if you have gratitude towards your own parents, at the very least, then your children will pick up on that and treat you accordingly. Yeah, so it will be passed along. And even from the point of view of meditation, it's said that the sort of richness of heart from appreciating the goodness in others, especially that which is very obvious from those who are close to us, crystallizes something positive in our own hearts and minds, which is definitely very useful when it comes to meditation. Some people have struggled with meditation for many years and they feel their meditation has somehow got stagnant or rather dry. But if you top it up with the sort of qualities from appreciating and having gratitude for the goodness, which one can see, especially from, let's say, one's parents, then it will help to restore that sense of flow and richness in our practice as well. So this is why I'm talking about it in the context of meditation today. Yeah? Not everyone agrees with gratitude or being thankful towards their parents. There are certain movements in society or philosophy which goes against the grain of gratitude towards parents. Some which I've noticed come particularly from an evolutionary stance, that of, for example, the idea that parents are only really taking care of their children because they want to see their genes passed on. What do you reckon? There's this idea of the selfish gene, where people are basically just a way of replicating the genes in their cells. So we're just being used by our genes to perpetuate themselves. Therefore, any kindness that comes from parents is just like an ulterior motive. What do you reckon? Not convinced. Okay. There's another one to do with hereditary sin, where people say that all the bad stuff in our lives got passed down from our parents, and therefore you have to make a clean break and never see them again. Yeah, usually dodgy cults like this sort of rationale. Never speak to your parents again. Cut off all the badness from your life. Not convinced? Okay. And of course there are some patrilineal cultures apparently where you have to prove yourself to be the macho person by being cruel to your parents. Not convinced. Okay. Well, you'll probably come to the right place then. Because within the Buddhist culture, anyway, even going back to something called the Asokan edicts. Have you heard of Asoka before? Emperor Asoka? Come on, those of you familiar faces must have heard of Asoka. Emperor going back about 1,500 years in India. He used to be like a really sort of tough king, going to war all over the place and being generally quite a cruel sort of guy. But then he picked up on teachings of Buddhism and meditation and became a completely different person. And he left behind a lot of teachings which he engraved on rocks. So this is why 1,500 years later there's still these sort of evidence remaining to be dug up by archaeologists and stuff from that sort of era. And these things are called edicts, some of the sort of sayings which he tried to preserve in stone. And one of them says, if a man should live to be 100 years old, carrying around his mother and father on his shoulders, so he carries them around on his shoulders for the rest of his life, even then he will not have rendered enough thanks to those parents for all the ways in which they have shown him kindness. Rephrase that again. The kindness one has received from one's parents is so great that even if you were to carry them around physically on one's shoulders, one mother on one side, father on the other side, for the rest of one's life, one would still not have repaid all the goodness which they have done for you. So parents are seen, held in great esteem in Buddhist culture for the kindness that they have shown to their children. Some people think that it's pretty easy to be a parent. What do you reckon? Some people said it's easy as falling off a log or something. Well, there's quite an interesting sketch on YouTube. I think it's part of Mother's Day initiative. And they set up a fake job interview, something like this. Yeah. Because most people who go for a job interview, they expect that any effort they put into their job will be, in terms of time and energy and ability, will be rewarded and recognized and remunerated. Yeah? So they posted a fake job title called a personal assistant and started randomly interviewing people to see who would want to get this job. So we don't know what the job is yet. And the interviewer explained that the job has a great range of responsibilities, some of which are quite extensive. And the first requirement for the job would be mobility, because at a high level of stamina, This might be required for 40 hours a week, or maybe longer than that, or maybe hundreds of hours a week, or perhaps unlimited hours per week. Sound pretty tough already? Tough job description. Sometimes 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with no breaks available. And generally, if you're an employee, you have a legal right to 20-minute rest breaks if you've been working for more than 6 hours. Know your rights. So you might want to phone up your union rep at this point. So you might be allowed to get your lunch, but only after the associate has done eating their lunch. And ideally, someone who is qualified for this job might have a degree in medicine, in finance, in culinary arts, and must be able to do a detailed risk assessment of anything that might threaten the life or the health of the associate which they are looking after. And in all the situations, you have legal responsibility for anything that might occur to threaten your charge at any time of the day. And the associate will need constant attention. Sometimes you have to stay up with them all night. You might need to help with their laundry, homework. You have to make sure that they're clean at all times and go to bed on time, and that they brush their teeth. And you must be able to work in a chaotic environment, especially on vacations, like Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year, and so on. Also, you need to have a cheerful disposition at all times. You might think this is a twisted joke, this job. There's no company car. You have to provide that yourself, and it probably will be a minivan. So you need to have a valid driving license. You might be doing a lot of driving, supermarkets, football games, sport meets, possibly to the emergency room. And the trickiest part is probably going to be the teenage years, where you're going to be required to deal with hormonal rampages and teenage heartbreak, puberty, and also the talk. And then we come now to the salary for this job. Are you interested in the job yet? So the position is going to actually pay you absolutely nothing. It's pro bono. Yeah. And you'll be doing the job completely free. In fact, you might need to take a second job to finance doing this job, because it doesn't actually pay you real money. Yeah. First year, the sole pay will be happy baby giggles and irresistible cuteness. Later on in your job, you might get some inside perks like pride, and if you're lucky, the occasional thank you. And generally, you won't be rewarded in any substantial way until the associate becomes a parent themselves and learns to appreciate you. And yes, and I hope you won't accuse me of being sexist. The job requires a 9-month unpaid internship. So have you guessed what this inhumane job is yet? Yeah, you have guessed. Parenthood and mostly motherhood. And ironically, despite these terrible, inhumane conditions, currently people holding this position, or one similar to it, adds up to about 43.5 million people worldwide who manage to meet every requirement. So this perhaps will bring home to you some of the sacrifices made by your personal assistant, the one that helped you out, and helped you to appreciate it a little bit more. Generally, the parenting remit is summarized within Buddhist culture in terms of 5 stages of parenting. Given that for the human species, more than any other species, providing food and shelter and clothing and education, medical care for offspring goes on for many years after they are notionally able to take care of themselves. Parents often have to put themselves at risk or in debt in order to look after children. If you find parents breaking the law, poaching, shoplifting, 99 times out of 100 they are doing it to put food on the table for their family. If it was for themselves personally, they'd never take such a risk. And not only that, but there's also a spiritual side to parenting as well, where it's not just enough to put food on the table, but you have to be a good example of the behaviors that you would like to see in your children as well, because if your children catch you saying, do what I say, not what I do, then you have major problems on the horizon. In characteristically Buddhist style, Buddhists tend to look back even before birth to the debt of gratitude that children owe their parents. So it can be said that, okay, that refers to the 9-month unpaid internship, but even before that as well. But yes, the sacrifices for 40 weeks of going for regular medical checkups, eating a nutritious diet, avoiding all the things that you'd like to have but can't have, and avoiding extremes of emotion for that 40-week period are all huge sacrifices made even before birth. And thankfulness to parents goes back even before, can you believe it, conception? Before conception? So the idea is that even if a child is born and immediately put up for adoption, they still owe their parents. And I've got a little story to finish off with to maybe explain a little bit more about appreciating what one's parents have done for one, even if they didn't go through the whole upbringing part of your life. So even if you never saw them after you were born, you still owe them. And here, this is the reason why it's said to be something very useful for us to inspire gratitude, to be able to appreciate the way we've been supported by parents. But here comes the story anyway. And the story is entitled An Orphan with a Debt to Pay. It's a traditional story. So, once upon a time, there was a certain woman of the streets. And by profession, she knew that if she became pregnant, if the child turned out to be a boy, then she would be unable to keep him. So, as her pregnancy progressed, she became more and more anxious, day by day, until at the end of 9 months, her fears were realized and the newborn babe was a boy. So many times she took the boy to the edge of the river with the full intention to throw him in, be done with it, finish the whole business, but with tears in her eyes from having carried her in her womb for so long, she could not bring herself to do the deed. So at the same time, she could not keep the baby. Otherwise, it would destroy her livelihood. Was it good? So she compromised by, in this country, probably would leave it in their church lobby somewhere. They still do that? Probably not. She left him a bundle by the roadside, where she thought there would be a compassionate passerby who would surely rescue the child and adopt him. And it turns out that the first passerby that morning, this is probably somewhere in Asia, was the abbot from the local temple going around with his alms bowl to collect food in the morning. And what should he see at the side of the road but a baby wrapped up and still very much alive. And he was afraid for the baby's welfare, so he took the baby back to the temple. And the abbot guessed how that baby had come to be there. But in the absence of anyone coming forward to claim the baby, he continued to provide all the food and shelter and clothing and education that the child needed to grow up to teenage. And eventually the little boy could run and play with the other children and do all the other things expected of him. But he had a chip on his shoulder. And he would run and hide if any of the other children who he played with teased him for not knowing who his parents were. So the boy would, at that point, blame his unseen parents for the predicament in which he found himself. So one day the abbot heard him complaining out loud about his parents who had abandoned him, and the abbot thought the time has come to have a little talk with this boy about his life. So the abbot started a conversation with the boy by asking him, if someone were to give you $1, would you curse him? And the boy said, of course not. I would bow to that person, or at the very least, thank them, and I would never forget my gratitude to them. So the abbot continued, and if someone were to come along and offer you $1 for your life, would you take it? And the boy said, of course I wouldn't. Do you think that's all my life is worth? So the abbot continued, $10 then. You must be joking. And the abbot raised the sum to 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, and still the boy would not part with his life so easily, right up to $1 million. And asked why, then the boy replied that even $1 million is useless to you if you have no life in which to spend it. Logic, so far so good? So, the abbot continued, what if someone were to come along and offer you $1 to cut off your right arm? Would you take it? Of course I wouldn't, said the boy indignantly. Do you think that's all the integrity of my body is worth? $10 then. And he raised the sum again, $100, $1,000, 10,000, 100,000, $1 million. And the boy would not part with $1 million for his right arm. So, don't you want to become a millionaire? Asked the abbot. And the boy said, even $1 million is no substitute for a lack of one's physical integrity. So the abbot continued his little lesson. And if someone to come along and offer you $1 to cut off your little finger, would you take it? Of course I wouldn't, said the boy angrily. Do you think I can put a price on a part of my human body? $10 then. And the boy said, forget it. So the abbot raised the sum to 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, million. And the boy would not part with his little finger for that price. Why? Because $1 million could not replace a healthy human body. So the abbot concluded, just now you said that if someone gave you even $1 single, you would thank them, bow to them, never forget your gratitude to them. And yet, your parents have given you a healthy human body for free, even the little finger of which you would not part with for $1 million. So how come you sit here cursing them for not having given you more? So this story illustrates how, even if we have nothing to thank our parents for, but from birth onwards, even if we have nothing to thank our parents for from birth onwards, we still owe them a debt of gratitude because due to them we have $1 million body that allows us to do all the good things that we do in our lives that we want to in this world. So this is my little introduction to the subject of why we need to value the goodness that we have received from our parents, even if we find it hard to appreciate or hard to visualize or hard to maybe separate out the good and maybe bad things that we have noticed in our parents. We still owe them a great deal. But how exactly to repay that debt of gratitude, then that's something I will talk about in my the remainder of this talk, which I will give next Thursday, not this Thursday, next Thursday. But for today I'll finish off with a few little publicity announcements. Firstly, for those of you who have just come fresh to meditation today, I would say if you found the practice useful, and I would encourage you to practice further, because practice makes perfect, and the meditation that you do each time accumulates a sort of energy and a mastery which will bring greater and greater benefits into your life. The way to do that would be to try to find maybe 20 minutes a day to meditate at home. Might be in the morning, might be in the evening, at a time of day which is fairly uninterrupted for you, at a time of day when you don't feel too tired out, and try to sit down, meditate, relax your body, relax your mind, focus at your center, use the mantra if you need to. And if you can do that every day, then it gets easier step by step. You find that in that 20 minutes, you'll be able to go further each time. Generally, after, even with the best intentions in the world, the inclination to meditate will get less as time goes on if you are left on your own. So there are certain things which you can do to sort of boost your inclination to meditate, one of which might be to listen to meditation guidance while you're meditating. There's an app called MindGem, which you can download for free onto your mobile phone, and Android or iOS. And there's a lot of audio tracks on there from various meditation teachers in our tradition, which you can follow along with, and also time your meditation as well as you are meditating. So you might want to look into that. Apart from that, meditating as a group is often quite encouraging, and every Tuesday and Thursday evening we have meditation classes here. Generally, the Thursday evening class has a little bit of a longer meditation, up to 45 minutes. Tuesday is a little bit shorter one. But apart from that, it's the same format, more or less. If you like to meditate from the comfort of your home more, they have also meditation via Zoom still, hangover from the pandemic, between 7 and 8 each Saturday. You can tune in to that and get meditation teaching online, and you can even ask questions from the monk leading the meditation as well. And the Zoom password for that is the same as for this event, which is the full moon, which we organize once a month. Next one is coming up on Saturday, the 16th of April, but all those Zoom details there are ones that you can also use on the Saturday evening meditations as well. For those looking for something more extensive, especially amongst the young men, the latest news on the European trying out being a monk for a month project is that the venue has been moved to Denmark instead of Belgium this time round, which made me quite interested in it as well. I've been to Denmark for a long time. But yes, you can try out being a monk for a couple of weeks or a month. And the sign-up is at eopdmc.eu. Yes, I think it's free of charge as well. And the next weekend retreat coming up here is between the 8th and the 10th of July. Generally, it's an overnight one where people sleep over and meditate Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday finishing up on the afternoon. That might be something you'd like to look into as well if you want to take your meditation further. Last but not least, there's an opportunity for any questions, comments, or feedback at this point, if anyone would like to share. Blessed with the opportunity to see all the goodness and repay the goodness that comes to you from the parents in your life.